Hi everyone, it's that time. Time to do some coding. First off, a reminder that you probably already knew, HTML Me Something is due today, like nowish, or afterwards, I guess, after lecture. You should make sure that you submit that if you have not done so already. Make sure you show it to your TA so they can get you signed off on that. And then we're gonna have Web Caesar, I think. That's the next assignment on the list, if I'm remembering correctly. So that'll be coming up pretty soon. The deadline for that'll be coming up. I meant to look it up. Is it next week? Yeah, next week. Sounds about right. So if you got HTML Me Something done, then you can go ahead and move on, start working on Web Caesar. Actually, the stuff we're talking about today is very much relevant to Web Caesar. So if you're looking for some help on getting started, good, you're in the right place. Yeah, any questions on upcoming assignments or current assignments or other things on the schedule before we start talking about today's materials? So today we're talking about forms. So let's just start off with the basics. What's a form? Sounds like a really obvious question, right? But we're talking about forms on your computer, not the paper forms that you have to fill out at the doctor's office and the DMV and all those other fun places.
But it's similar.
It is similar, right?
Filling out
Yeah.
some information on a website.
Yeah, you're filling out some information on a website. That's exactly right. So it's a way for us to gather some input from our users and then use that information to perform some tasks. You use forms all the time. Anytime you go log into a website, that's a form. Anytime you write an email, that's a form. So we're using forms all the time. Anytime you go to Amazon, you buy something, you have to punch in your credit card number, that's a form. These are all forms that we've seen on a regular basis. And so we're going to start talking about how we can build our own forms, gather our input from our users, and then put that information to good use. So let's talk more about the nuts and bolts behind forms, how they work, how we use them. What are some input types that we might expect to find on our forms? Text, so that's a very common one. Just let somebody type in some stuff. What else? Password, so a password is a special kind of text box, right? That obscures what you're typing, so if somebody's spying on you, looking over your shoulder, they can't actually see what your password is. What else? Checkboxes. Radio buttons, so what's a radio button? You can only pick one thing from the group of things, so I have to group them together, and then I can only select one from the group. Yeah, what else we got? Hidden. Oh yeah, hidden is a fun one. We're going to see hidden inputs, probably not so much today, but we will see them coming up in our walkthrough probably next week sometime in the near future. It's what do we use hidden inputs for? Does anybody have any ideas?
If you're going to pass specific information
Mm-hmm.
that the user doesn't have to input.
Yeah, so it's not input from the user necessarily. It's a way for us as programmers to mark certain things on the form with the user not even necessarily knowing that we're doing it, right? It's more like bookkeeping for ourselves on our end. What else? We got others. Select. What's a select?
It's like pull down at different options.
Yeah, you might hear it called like a drop-down box or a combo box or something like that. I'm sure you've seen them before, familiar. Any other ones that I'm not remembering?
Code Academy, I think, covered for like like a volume, but.
Oh, like a slider
Yeah.
kind of deal? Yeah, where it can slide back and forth to select a value within a certain range. Yep. There's lots. I'm sure there are others that I have not covered, but the ones that we've talked about are the major ones, the ones that we are used to commonly seeing on the websites that we frequent on a regular basis. And so we're going to make a form. Our form's probably going to have, it's going to have at least one input, right? It might have lots of inputs. And so the next question is, how do we keep track of them? How do I know, when I'm looking at the form, we're going to talk later about how to process the form data, right? How do I get the data out? How do I actually keep track of the different inputs? What do I use? A label or a name or an ID? All things that we saw in the prep work today. Which ones do we really care about, though, for this purpose? ID and name? What's the difference? Did anybody get a feel for the difference between ID and name on this?
When you're sending to server, the name needs to be the same as what server is expecting, or if you for a query, then put the ID for internal purposes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so the name is something that may get exposed to the outside world, possibly, right? The ID is more internal. ID we've actually seen before. So we've seen it used a lot of times with CSS in particular. So, you know, if you're worried about styling your form, that would be what the ID is used for, right? Applying particular style information to the form, you'd use the ID for that. The name is used more for the actual processing. What is this value that the user is typing in? What does it represent? Good. How do we tell a form what to do with the given inputs? So one of the inputs that we actually missed is a very important one. A button. A submit button, yeah. Once I hit that submit button, how do we tell it what's supposed to happen next? There's a method. That's one piece, and the two options we have, get and post. So we talked about this last time, but it's good time to review it now. If I use a get request to submit a form, what's going to happen? The input's going to be exposed. It's going to be up in the URL. I'm going to see it right there in the URL, right? If I use a post request, then it'll be hidden inside of the request. So which one we use kind of depends on how sensitive the information is, you know, how much exposure we're willing to tolerate. We saw examples last week of searching for things on Google, right? That's a form. The Google search box is a form, and they expose the search term right in the URL because who cares what I'm searching for most of the time? It doesn't matter if that's public information or not. Whereas if I had a form that was collecting credit card information or social security numbers or things of that nature, having it exposed like that would be very bad. I'd want to make sure that I use post requests to handle that particular form. So yeah, it's just a matter of what kind of data you're working with. And then there's another piece that we need to dictate what happens to our form processing as well. What's that? The action. So what's the action telling us? Where it's going. It's a location. It's a URL. It's an address, right? Take the information from this form, package it up either in a GET request or a POST request, whichever one you've decided, and send it off to this location. And so then whenever it gets to that location, right, it's going to have to retrieve that data somehow, pull the information out of the request, and then do something with it, whatever the behavior of the website is expected. Good. So that whole process of taking data from a form, sending it somewhere else, and then doing something with that data, that's our job now. That's what we're doing in this class. That's what we're going to do today in the walkthrough and what you're going to do today in the studio. And so we're going to need to know stuff like, how do we actually access that data? How do we grab that data from the request in Python? So how do we do that? What does that look like? It depends on whether it's a get or a post. That's absolutely true. So if it's a post request, what do I do? Request.post or I'm sorry, I just couldn't quite hear you. Request.form. Yeah, request.form and then followed by square brackets and then the name of the piece of data that I'm trying to get back out. What does that tell you about what that structure is? What kind of structure is that? It's not a list. It's a dictionary. Yeah, it's a dictionary because we're plugging in keys, not indexes, but keys. Key value pairs. Good. What if it's a GET request? How do I get the parameters? How do I get the form data out of a GET request? Anybody remember? Request.args.get, and then the name of the thing that I want to pull from the request. Yeah. So those are the query parameters. Those are the chunks of the URL, right? So two different ways based on what kind of requests that we have. Good. Are there any other questions about forms or form processing before we hop into today's walkthrough? All right, so we're going to do this today. If you have your computer handy, now's the time to get it out and get it ready. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to start coding myself, as a matter of fact. Get these slides out of the way, and I'm going to pull up Git Bash here real quick and zoom in a bit so you can actually see it, hopefully. All right, here's my Git Bash. So I'm actually already in my repository. I already did the CD into LC101 and then the CD into FlickList, right? So I'm in the repository from last time, and you can see that I'm still on the Studio One branch. That's the last thing that we did on Monday, right? Was Studio One review. I'm still on the Studio One branch. So the first thing, if you're here, like I am, the first thing you're gonna need to do is what? Virtual environment. We do need that piece, but I mean, it doesn't have to be the first thing that we can do, but it could be. We're gonna need to change the branch, but actually before we change the branch, there's something else that we might need to do first. What about the work that you did on Monday? You need to make sure, do a quick git status check and make sure that your work has been committed from Monday. Now, I actually already did mine because I'm in the habit of committing before I shut my computer down and leave for the day. So I actually committed my work on Monday. It's already committed. If you didn't commit your work from Monday, now's the time. Make a commit. Save your work, add the files, make a commit. It will not let you change your branch until you've done that, right? So I don't have to do that. I already did. There's nothing to commit. So I can go ahead and now check out my branch if I want to. So we're going to check out the walkthrough 2 branch because that's what day we're on, walkthrough 2. All right. And if everything goes well, it should switch you over to the walkthrough 2 branch. If something goes wrong, if you didn't commit your work, it'll probably tell you, hey, you need to commit your work before you can do this, right? And then we're going to open up main.py. That's where our work's going to go today. If I look at main.py, I see that it's got, a rough outline of the solution to Studio One from Monday. It doesn't look exactly the same as how we did it. This is the quote-unquote official Studio solution from Monday, but this is basically where we left off. This is basically where we stopped on Monday. And the first thing that I'm actually going to do today is delete most of this. Goodbye. I deleted almost all of it. We're going to start from scratch. You might be thinking, well, what a waste. And, it deserves some justification. I want to switch up the functionality of this website a little bit. You remember from Monday's Studio that we were basically telling people what they had to watch? Well, that's not really fun for our users. We want them to tell us what they want to watch, right? We want them to be providing us with the information about the movies that they care about, not the other way around. So today we're gonna make a form that allows users to tell us about the movies that they want to watch. That's our goal for today. All right? So let's go ahead and get started. You notice I kept my index and I kept my route, right? I kept that information, okay? And we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna make a form that's gonna allow users to type in a name of the name of a movie that they want to watch, and we're gonna take the name of that movie and we're gonna add it to the list, their movie list, right? We're gonna add it to their movie list. But first things first, let's talk about the form. We need to make a form. So I'm gonna start coding stuff up as a string. I'm gonna start making a form. So first thing I need to do, if I wanna make a form, what do I need to start typing here? Doc type. All right, doc type. I'm missing something already, aren't I? Exclamation point. Does it go here? Yeah, something like that. HTML. Okay, and then next. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, so let's talk about that a bit. You'll notice that I'm I'm creating this directly inside of the function. The question was, is there a reason why I'm doing it that way as opposed to creating it outside of the function? I mean, what are the advantages of doing that? What are the advantages of doing it inside versus outside, or the other way around, outside the function versus inside the function? It's inside the function. What was that last part? Easier to import? Possibly. I think, so if it's outside, if I do this outside of the function, that means the scope is wider, which means I could reuse it in other functions if I wanted to. So that's an interesting concern, right? If I use it inside the function, then it can only be used within the function, right? So, I think it's something worth thinking about. I'm going to keep doing it this way for now, but it's possible that we may change our mind in the future. That often happens. Yeah? Question?
Yeah, on the positive side, can you use the same name? Because if you put it as a global function, as assign it to a global variable for a string, then you can't use that name.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, if I have a global variable, that variable name is gone. It's not available for me to be used anymore. So, yeah. In fact, that's maybe something that I forgot here. Should probably stick this in a variable, right? Okay. So doc type HTML. Sorry, I'm cheating a little bit. I have some notes on my phone, so I'm just making sure I don't forget anything as I'm going through this walkthrough. All right, and then I'm gonna, what's next? Probably an HTML tag, and then inside the HTML tag, I've probably got, what kind of tag? A head tag, and we'll stick a title, flick list, close the title, close the head. What comes after my head tag? Body. All right. I'm going to pause here. I know I'm going a little fast. I hear furious typing, so I'm going to give you a second. Okay. So inside the body of our page, we're going to put maybe like a little title up at the top. It says like welcome to Flick List or something, right? And then we're going to put a form. It's going to be a very simple form. It's just going to say, I want to watch, blank movie, right? Something like that. Or I want to add blank to my watch list. That's what I want our form to ultimately look like. Okay? So let's go ahead and make just a quick little introduction here. We're going to use an H1 tag to put in a little introduction to our website. And now we get to the fun part. This is where our form's going to be. So this is where I'm going to ask you for a lot more help. I want to create a form, so I'll spot you the form tag, but what other information do we need to provide with our form tag? An action, so we need to give it an action. Action equals, and so now we have a decision to make, right? Where are we going to send this information? Where are we going to send it? And honestly, it can be anywhere. This is our website. We get to decide where this goes. We don't have any other pages that exist yet. So we're making a form. We need to send this somewhere, but that somewhere that we're sending it does not exist yet. So that's something that we're going to have to complete later on in order to make this fully functional. So for now, we could put almost anything here, right? And I'm just going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to put a plain old slash. So what does that represent? If I just put a slash in there like that, where am I telling it to send that information? The home page or the page I'm currently at, and actually I'm looking at my notes and it says that's a bad idea, so I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to send it to a page called add instead. Glad I double checked that. Would have come back to haunt me later. All right, what other information do we need to decide on? We need to decide on a method. And again, I only have two options here, right? It's either going to be get or it's going to be post. In this particular case, does it matter which one we pick? Does anybody have strong feelings one way or the other? I don't think it really matters. Like, are you ashamed of the movies that you're watching? If you are, then I don't know, go talk to somebody about that, I guess. But I'm not ashamed of the movies that I'm watching. I will say, though, that even if that's true, even if it's okay for data to be exposed, I still think it's probably reasonable to consider whether you should just use a post request anyway, for one of the primary reasons being that URLs can get very cluttered. And if people see those URLs, like how many times has somebody tried to send you a picture and the address is like 10 miles long, right? That's inconvenient, right? So if we can do our part to try and keep the URLs somewhat clean, that's a possible advantage, but maybe also a possible disadvantage in other ways. Yeah.
So if you want the user to be able to send the list of the URL that
Yeah.
give his buddy the list of movies,
Yeah.
then don't we need to do a get?
I mean, that's the good question. If we want to be able to send a URL to somebody else that will add a movie to their list, right? We'd have to use the GET request in that case. It depends on the kind of functionality that we're looking for. If we explicitly do not want to allow that to happen, which might be the case in some situations, I do not want people to be able to send links that can modify stuff on the website, then I would definitely want to use a post request to make that happen. The fact of the matter is, this is our website. It's our, we get to choose which way we want to do it. It really does not make a whole lot of difference. In fact, I'm hoping that we'll have enough time to do it both ways today, just so that we can kind of compare and contrast what that looks like in code. For now, I'm going to pick post, and if we have time at the end, I'll come back and switch this to get, and we'll do it that way as well, just to see what that would look like. Any other information I need to include with my form tag? Can you guys see this okay in the back? Sorry, I know can I make this a little bigger somehow? I thought, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Oh, well, okay, it's kind of working. How do I get this out of here? There, okay, that's better. Now it's maybe a little too big. Okay, stop it. All right, that's all right. Sorry for the divergence. Okay, so we've got our form tag, right? Got our form tag. So the next thing we need to do is decide on the contents of our form. Okay. So I'm gonna put some text in here first. I'm just gonna say I want to add, and then this is where I need a blank space, right? I need a blank space at this point, because this is where I want the users to fill in the blank and tell me which movie that they want to add. So how do I do that? How do I put a blank space right here? Well, be careful. We're dealing with a form, so I want them to be able to type. So what kind of input does that seem like to you? Text. So how do I stick a text box in right here? Input type equals text. Do I need to specify any other information about this input tag? We need to give it a name, probably. So I'll call it movie, right? Anything else? We could give it an ID. In fact, I might just give it the same name. It doesn't really matter, right? Could give it an ID. It's probably good practice to do that, because even though I'm not going to do CSS today, in a real world application, we'd probably want to apply some CSS to our page, and so we may want to tie this to an ID for that purpose. Otherwise, I think we're good. How do I close this tag? I type a slash and then the bracket, right? I don't need a whole separate tag for that purpose. All right, to my watch list. And that's just finishing the sentence. Yeah, question? I'm sorry?
So when you write the text, I want to.
Yes. Yes. No, I do not. This is just going to show up as plain old text on the form. It'll look like a sentence with a text box in the middle. That's what it'll look like. Kind of like a Mad Lib, right? Yeah.
So input is an inline.
So that's a good point. Input is an inline element. True or false? I mean, based off of how we're treating it right now, yes, it is. It's an inline element. Yep, that's right. There's something else that we can actually use to provide a little bit more usability to our forms. Does anybody remember? A label. What's a label do? If you click on the text, then it will put the cursor in the text box so that you can start typing, right? So I could click on the text box itself and start typing, but I could also click on the other text around it and also start typing. So we can add a label in just for fun. Label. What information do I need to provide to the label tag to make it function properly? The name. Like this? No? It's the word for. I specify which input element this is matched up with using the for attribute. So then I would type in movie, the name of the input. And then I would come down here and close out my label. So that means now if they click on the text that I've written, it'll also focus on the text box. Right? Yeah.
If you're wrapping the label around the input, you still need to say that it's for the.
If I'm wrapping the label around the inputs, I think you do actually, yes. I mean, because technically I could switch this to be something else. It would be very confusing if I did so, but I could technically put any inputs there that I wanted to. I don't think that's a good idea necessarily, but I think we do need to be explicit. And even if we don't need to be explicit, I think it's good to be explicit just to make sure that everything is as clear as possible. I am always in favor of adding more code, even if it's not strictly necessary, if it will increase understandability of the code. That is always something that I'm in favor of. All right, so we've created our form. There's one final form piece that we're missing, which is a submit button. All right, so how do I stick one of those on here? Input type, this time is going to be submit. Any other information I need to provide to my submit button to function? I don't need to, but if I wanted to, I could provide a little extra, right? I can customize what the button looks like. How do I do that? Value, yeah, I can add a value attribute. This is just going to change what text is listed on the button. That's all it does. It doesn't change the functionality at all. It just changes what the button says. So I'll change that to say edit. And close that input tag. And we're done with our form. So I'll close my form. And actually, this is driving me a little crazy, just a little formatting thing. I kind of want to indent this so I can see the contents of the form a little bit easier. Just makes me feel a little bit better to have it indented like that. And this is our whole page, right? We're done. So how do we finish up the HTML here to make this a complete page? /body /HTML. All right, and then how do I make this function happy? Oh, I need to, there's a little bit of cleanup I need to do. I need to close the string, right? And then what's the last thing I have to do to make this function happy? I have to return the content, right? I have to return the content. All right, so we did it. We made a form. We haven't tested it yet. That's going to be next. But we made this form, and hopefully it's going to have a text box on it that we can fill in with a movie we want to watch and submit to our watch list. That's the hope. The next thing we're going to do is test it out. But before I do, any questions about what we've done so far? All right, let's take it for a spin. At this point, it's not going to be functional, right? Because I haven't actually coded anything up on the other side to say do something with this information. We haven't done that part yet, but let's at least just check the form and make sure it looks okay before we move on. So I'm going to go over to my console, and what do I need to do to run this again? Yeah, I need to activate my environment first. So source, activate, hello Flask. This takes a second. All right, and now I'm good. So now what do? Python main.py. Alrighty, it says it's running, so let's open it up. You can copy this address here and go over to your browser and paste it in. Whoops. Did I not save, or what's the deal? I didn't save, sorry. I do that a lot, my bad. That's from last time. All right. I saved it, I refreshed, and here we go. Here's my form. I want to add blank text box to my watch list. If you missed something along the way, you might see an error page here instead, right? Let's see if I can force an error somehow. I can force an error by just messing with the indenting a little bit, maybe. Save that, go back, refresh the page. Oh, refuse to connect. That's not good. I really screwed it up. Oh, so it's in here. It's in the console. Expected an indented block, right? So I screwed up the indenting. I did that on purpose just to show what would happen if I had a mistake. Sometimes you'll actually see the mistake in the web page itself, right? Some of you have probably seen that. As you're working on the prep work and on the studios, you might have seen that happen. It's trying to tell you what goes wrong, and I hope that we actually see that in the walkthrough sooner or later, because I want to talk to you about how to interpret that information to help you solve problems when you see it happen. It's trying to tell you, though, what the problem is, trying to tell you where things go wrong. In this particular case, though, it seems to be working okay. Oops, I need to start it again. There we go. Refresh. Seems to be working okay, but what happens if we type in a movie and then hit add? What do we expect to happen now? Ah, okay. So not quite nothing, almost nothing. It couldn't find what we're looking for. Notice the address at the top. It sent me to /add. It sent me to /add, which is what I told it to do, right? That's what I told it to do. So it sent me here, and then I haven't actually put anything here yet, so now it's saying, well, okay, I don't know what to do. I have no idea. You haven't told me what to do from this point. So that's what's coming up next. That's our next task, is to actually process this information. Before I do that, any final, last chance, well, not last chance, but if you have any questions on the form before I switch gears a little bit? Yeah, in the back. Is there a way to prevent it from being a blank entry? The answer is yes. We're actually going to talk about validation. I believe that's the topic for Monday, if I'm remembering properly. So that would be form validation, meaning did they type what I wanted them to type into the box, or did they give me a bunch of garbage, right? So that is something we care about. That is something we're going to talk about in the future. Great question. Any other questions? So let's process this form. That's our next goal. We need to make a new page, right? We need to make that add page. How do I do that? I have to make another route. App.route, and now it's going to be /add. That's the page where I told it to go, right? Wait, we're not actually done yet, because what kind of request am I sending? I'm sending a post request right now. I can verify that by looking at the form. I'm sending a post request. So because I'm doing that, I actually need to tell Python that I'm expecting a post request to come in, not a GET request. So how do I do that? Over here, I say method, what do I say? Equals brackets, square brackets, yeah? Something goes inside of here, right? Post, like that, quotes. Method with an S, plural. I think this is right. We can test this real quick, right? If we really wanted to test this just really quickly, what can we do? We can say def add movie, and then just return hi, right? Just a little quick message just to make sure that we set this up properly. This is not going to process the form, right? We'll have to come back and do that. But if we just want to check to make sure that we set this route up properly, just put in a little simple message here real quick, go back to our page, and hit the button again. Hi, okay. We're good. We're good. It got there. So this is not what we want to happen. We were just running a little test real quick. What we actually want to happen is to pull the name of the movie out of the form and then say, print out a message saying, this movie, whatever the name of the movie is, has been added to your watch list. Now, this is the point of the walkthrough where I say that we don't actually have a watch list, and we're not going to make a watch list. There is no watch list. We're lying to our users right now. It doesn't exist. We haven't gotten that far yet to be able to permanently save information like that. We will. We're going to get there, but for now, we're just going to lie to them and say that we added it to their watch list. We're not actually going to do that part today. Today's just going to be about processing the form. So let's go back here. We don't want to return hi. We want to return a page that says name of the movie, whatever it is, was added to your watch list. So I'm making a web page. What do I need to start typing in? What do I need to do? I need to make a variable called content. And then the first part of this is going to be what? Doc type. And then the head. Well, wait a second. We already did that, right? So this goes back to what somebody was asking about earlier. We actually have some code. I'm seeing redundancies now, right? I'm seeing that I'm about to type the same stuff that I already have. That's actually a good indication that, hey, maybe I should have made some global variables out of that information to make my life a little easier. So, some of this information is going to be repeated. I would say like this part probably is going to be repeated. The form is not. That is unique to this particular part of my application, right? And then, this little tiny chunk at the bottom with the closing tags is also going to be repeated. In fact, we have names for those at the top and the bottom. We call that the header and the footer. So let's take a minute to actually go back and refactor our code a little bit, make it a little bit easier to use. I'm going to take this code that I have highlighted right now. I'm actually going to take it out and make a global variable out of it called header and put it in. The indentation is terrible. I can try to fix that a little bit. It doesn't really matter, right? HTML does not care about indentation. Python does, but HTML does not. So it doesn't really matter what the indentation looks like. But it bothers me. I care a little bit. I don't know. That's fine. Anyway, and then I'll make another one for the footer. Where I just grab this tiny chunk down here. All right. This is me being finicky about indentation again. Not that it really matters all that much. Matters to me. And now, actually what I can do is I can come down here and take this out, right? And replace it with the variable that I had, the variable that I just created. So I can say it equals header plus the form plus the footer. Sorry, let me just stop that for a second. Does this make sense what I just did right here? Okay, sorry, thanks for the heads up, yeah. Thanks for the heads up. I'm gonna pause here for a moment. I took out the header, the first piece and the last piece because I thought, oh, I'm actually gonna need these multiple times, right? I'm gonna wanna reuse these. And so I put them into global variables up here called header and footer, and that allowed me to rewrite this content by just concatenating the header to the form that I created and then concatenating the footer on the end. Question?
You're going to have to say the function is going to have to take header and footer as parameters.
Take header and footer as parameters? You mean like here?
Yeah.
I don't think so. These are global variables, meaning they can be seen from any function in my program without any extra work from me. I just can use them like any other variable in any function. Yeah, of course. So this process that we just went through is actually something called refactoring, where I take existing code that works and I don't actually modify how it works. I just reorganize it a little bit, right? That's called refactoring. It's usually done to make your code a little bit easier to understand, easier to read, a little bit more efficient perhaps. But this is going to save us time. Think about what this would mean. If I didn't do this, then every time I added a new route to my page, I would be typing this chunk of code over and over and over and over again. And what happens if later on I decide, FlickList actually isn't that great of a name for my website. I want to change the name of my website to something else. Then I would have to go to every single page and change the name of FlickList in all of those spots, right? Whereas by keeping this in one place and then reusing it over and over again, it saves me a little bit of time and also makes it easier if I want to modify it. If I change something here, it automatically is going to get changed anywhere that I use this variable. So it makes it easier for me to update my page. And so if I look at this add movie piece, we're going to do a similar pattern here where I start with the header. I put some information next that's unique to that page, right? And then I tack the footer on the end. That's going to be sort of the pattern for adding content to our page. For now, that process will evolve in the future. So we can actually start piecing this together. Content equals, it's going to look very similar. Header plus, this is where I get to decide what should be on this page, right? So it's just going to be one sentence. So I'll put a p tag in here, and then the next thing that I want to see is the name of the movie that was submitted to us. So how do I get that information? How do I get that information out of the form? Request.form. So let's make a variable for it. New movie equals, you said request.form. And then what? Square brackets because it's a dictionary, right? And then inside the brackets I put movie, which is the name that I applied to the input of my form, correct? So now that I have that, I can concatenate it in here Actually, triple quotes is maybe a little overkill for this. Ah, how about quintuple quotes? Oh, wow, this is cool. That's not what I meant to do, sorry. I'm just trying to simplify this code a little bit. Header plus a p tag plus movie has been added to your watch list. Yeah, close the p tag, thank you. And then what am I going to tack on the end? Footer. Thank you. Although I'm going to leave that for a second to show what would happen. You are absolutely correct that I need a plus sign here, but I'm going to leave it broken just for a second so that we can see what will happen. I do, yes. Okay. So this function is actually significantly shorter than the last one, right? It's doing quite a bit less work. It's just pulling the value out of the form and then stitching together a page that puts this movie in as the content. And I know that there's a problem. I know I forgot to put a plus sign here. So let's see what happens. I also need to what? Ah, I also need to import request. Well, let's see what happens. Let's see what it tells us. It's actually already telling us that there's a problem, right? It says invalid syntax. Invalid syntax. That's probably due to the plus sign. So let's put that back in. Yeah. Well, let's see what happens if I don't put in the import statement. See, it's running now. It didn't give me any complaints yet. I'm going to refresh the page. Type in a movie. All right. I would hope that it would pop up and show me the message. Here we go. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Sometimes if I don't do things properly, this is what I see instead. It's going to show me error in the page itself. And it returns a lot of stuff that looks like it's nothing that we've been talking about, right? I don't know what this is. Like, I'm serious. I have no idea what this is talking about right now. That's nothing to do with me. I didn't do this. But if I keep going down this list and I'm looking at these lines of code, right, eventually I'll see something that I did do, that I was responsible for. And that's the important piece. So when you're looking at error messages like this, you do need to go through and kind of look around and see for stuff that you're responsible for. See if you can try to find out what the actual problem is. And here we go. It's actually the very last one. I recognize this line of code. I wrote that line of code just a second ago. And it says error, name request is not defined. So it doesn't know what this is talking about. It doesn't know what this is. It doesn't know what request is. And that would be your clue then to say, oh, that's because I didn't import it. That's my fault. I didn't import request. Right? So that's how to decipher these errors. May take a little bit of digging, may take a little bit of work to sift through it and find the part that's relevant to you, but you can ignore the stuff that's not relevant to what your work is. All right, so I'll add the request in there, and now we can go back and try one more time. I'm gonna have to go back to the original page. I guess I need to restart it. No module name request, is that true? Oh, I did it the wrong one? My bad. Actually, I don't even need random anymore, do I? That's not... Come on. It's been a long day, you guys. All right, let's try again. Hey, okay, that's a little better. All right, here's the page. Type in the name of a movie. Oh, all right. Success. We did it. There were some bumps along the way, but we did it. Yeah, what's up? Yep. Yeah, so the question was, when do I decide to put p tags in versus just typing out the content directly in the page, right? P tags are very useful if I expect to apply a class or an ID so that I can style that text. That would be a great usage for a p tag. P tags also do insert a blank line in between text, so that can be useful as well. If I take the p tag out here, I'm not actually sure if we would notice a difference or not, but we can try it real quick and see if we would. Just take the p tag out real quick and save the file and go back to the page, and probably have to submit it again. Doesn't look that different to me, honestly. So in this case, does it matter that much? No, not really. In other situations, though, it might. Yeah, what's up?
I actually did mine without doing the plus footer at the end.
Without the what?
Plus footer.
Sure.
And it seemed to work the same way.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a kind of open secret. HTML is pretty lenient. If I forget a closing tag, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it'll figure out what I'm talking about and be able to handle it for me. Does that mean we should just stop putting in closing tags? No. No, because it'll eventually get you. We do want to keep writing valid HTML. That is our responsibility. But HTML is a bit more flexible. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Which I think is kind of a bad thing. I almost wish it would be more strict because that's what I'm used to dealing with as a programmer. But you know, to each their own. Yeah, of course. Is there a particular section you were? If you have errors, I'd be happy to come around and take a peek once we break up into our groups. I did want to do, we have just a little bit of time left. I did want to double back and do something that I was talking about a little bit earlier, which is if I switch this to a GET request, right? Instead of using a POST request, how is that going to affect our code? There's a couple pieces that we would need to change. So what's one thing that would need to change? I'm sorry? So this part would go away, right? I just flat out don't need it anymore, right? What else would need to change? So this would no longer work. That's how we process POST requests. How do I process GET requests? Request.get. And now GET is not a dictionary. GET is a method. So I just plug in what? Movie, right? And there's one other piece that I need to manipulate. Where is it? In the form. Yeah, right here in the form. I would need to switch this to say get. All right, I think that should do it. Let's go back and try it and see what happens. I'm going to go back and refresh this page. And so I don't notice anything different yet, right? I type the movie into the box, I hit add it, and now actually I see, whoops, okay, so there's one difference. It doesn't work. So this line's not quite right. Do we skip a piece? Probably. .args. Is it like that? .args.get? All right, let's try that again. There we go, that's better. So that works, and then also you notice that up here I see the query parameter, right? I actually see the value from the form being passed in the URL, not in the request, not in the POST request. They both are functional, right? They both have their advantages and disadvantages. I think for the purposes of this exercise, both are probably fine, but there are situations when we certainly would prefer one over the other. This is just not one of those times. Yeah, what's up?
Does form in HTML have a default method?
Does form in HTML have a default method? Not that I know of. I don't think I've ever written a form in my entire life without the method attribute on it. Not on purpose, anyway. Get is the default? That wouldn't surprise me. I still am in favor of making things explicit when possible, so I don't like relying on default values if I don't have to. But you're all adults. You get to decide how to write your own code and make your own web pages, and if that's what you want to do, then cool. Any other questions that I can answer for you about this walkthrough? Going back to the code, yeah. I mean, I can do you one better if you're struggling with the code, right? The next thing that you're going to do to prep is what? We're done with the walkthrough. We're about to start the studio. You're going to commit, and you're going to check out the studio branch. And inside of that studio branch, what are you going to see? This. It may not look exactly the same. I think I deviated from the script a little bit. I almost always do. That's just part of who I am, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a script follower necessarily, but it'll look mostly like this. So you can refer back to it as you're working on today's studio. Any final questions before I wrap up and let you guys get to work? Yeah, what's up? I'm sorry? Yeah, so I mean, if I had something broken in my code, it was telling me about it. And I had to go through that list and figure out which part was relevant to me and decide how to fix my code based on that. Well, my code works right now. So, no, that's part of Flask. If there's an error in my website, when I try to visit a page, Flask will print out the errors. It only happens if something's wrong. There isn't a page that I can go to that says, show me the errors. It's only if something goes wrong will it show me what those errors are. Yeah. You'll see it sooner or later. If you haven't seen it yet, you will, I promise. And if you need help deciphering what it's telling you, what it means, let me know, and I'd be happy to go through it with you. Any other questions? Cool. You have a studio today that's, related to this concept, related to this idea. If you understand what we did in the walkthrough, the studio should be pretty straightforward. So get to work on that, and if you finish that up, you probably want to go ahead and get started on Web Caesar. That would be my advice to you. And also, of course, submit your HTML me something today if you haven't done that. Thanks, everybody.